amazing artists, Mrs. Hales here. Today we're going to paint our pumpkin or jack-o'-lantern paintings. I'm so excited because I love to paint and because we're going to be mixing orange and we're going to be mixing green. Now, orange and green along with purple are our secondary colors. Remember, red, blue, and yellow are the primary colors. So we're going to use those three colors to make orange and green. We also are going to go over some different things about brushes and how I want you to clean up your watercolor paints, or if you don't have the ability to do that, how they should be cleaned. So somebody will be cleaning your watercolor pans. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about brushes. This is a number 1 brush and it is round. The paint brushes have numbers on them, and sometimes they have numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and those numbers correspond with the size of the brush. So the big flat brushes have numbers on them that measure how wide they are. So these are 5/8 of an inch and 3/4 of an inch. So for this project, you need a 6 or 7 round brush, which is a smaller or medium-sized round brush, and that's probably in your watercolor pan. And then you need a 5/8 an inch, 3/4 of an inch, or 1 inch flat brush. Let's talk about mixing colors. I'm going to mix right here on the lid of my watercolor pan, and I'm going to make a light green. I know I have 2 greens on my palette, but I just want to make a light green. I'm going to start with yellow. I'm going to put some water, clear water on my yellow paint, and I'm going to scoop some of that yellow paint over into my lid. I'm going to do this 3 or 4 times so I make enough green paint that I can paint my leaves green. And I'm scraping the edge of my brush and that watery paint back into my lid. Now I'm going to take a little bit of blue and I'm going to put some of that blue into my yellow and see which green I make. You usually, until you know what you're doing when you mix colors, you want to always start with your lighter color and add your darker color to that. Now I'm going to go back and see how the green I made differs from the green that's in my pan. So the green that I made is more of an earthy green, and then the greens that are in my palette already or my watercolor pan are a little bit brighter. So it's just whichever green you like best is the green you can use in your painting picture, in your pumpkin picture. Now I'm going to make orange, and because Miss Hales I should have started with my yellow paint, but because Miss Hales, I know how much yellow I'm going to have to add to this red to make it lighter orange. I didn't do that, but you should start with your yellow paint and add red to it. Now, of course, I already have orange paint on my palette, but I want my pumpkins to be 2 different oranges. So I'm gonna make another orange, and I'm getting a lot of that yellow to mix into my red because I started with my darker color. I'm gonna need a lot more yellow. So here's the orange that I made. You can see it's a very natural, kind of an earthy looking orange, and the orange that's already in my palette is a little bit brighter of an orange. So if I wanted to darken up my orange, I could add some of my red, more red to my yellow, or red to my orange. And so if you have 3 jack-o'-lanterns, you could have 3 different oranges. All right, now it's time to paint your pictures. Look at all that green paint that's on my yellow. I'm just gonna take my brush and some clean water and clean that yellow paint off. Now I'm gonna put my paints up above or over to the side of what I'm painting, and I'm gonna start to paint. I am mixing my colors off to the side, and you can't see that, but that's okay because I just showed you how to mix your colors. So you're going to start with your lighter color and mix the darker color in. Don't do what Miss Hales does. Start with your lighter color and mix your darker color in. So start with your yellow and mix in your red. You probably only have 1 red on your picture, in your paint palette, sorry. I like to use my bigger brush when I'm mixing colors because my bigger brush holds more water. And then I'm going to switch to my smaller brush when I want to paint my pumpkins or my jack-o'-lanterns. I'm going to try to stay in between my black crayon lines, in between the segment lines, just in case my black crayon smears. but it's okay if it smears a little bit because you can always go back over that area where it smeared with more paint after your paint dries the first time. Whenever you're painting with watercolor, you're going to get some color variation, which means your water is going to pool and settle in places on your paper, and it's going to be darker where that happens. And that's fine. That's totally normal with watercolor, and I think it's actually one of the beautiful effects of watercolor. Your color isn't completely flat. If you want completely flat color, that's when you paint with tempera or acrylic. So I want my pumpkins to be 2 different colors. So I'm going to mix the orange on my palette with a little bit of yellow to make this pumpkin, my angry pumpkin, a little bit lighter and a little bit brighter. I realized that I didn't end my pumpkin right down here, but I'm going to go ahead and paint that in, and I'll add that black outline in just a minute. So I'm painting quickly, and if you need to pause this this video or this screen, you can ask your proctor to pause it, or you guys can pause it yourself. I'm going to paint my orange pumpkins first, and then I'm going to come back in when that dries and either paint with black paint or yellow paint my eyes and my mouth. Remember, you don't want to put wet paint next to wet paint with watercolor because those colors will bleed together. So I started to use crayon, and then I realized I wanted to see what it looked like if I used the black watercolor paint. So I'm going to use my smaller brush for this because this is a smaller area. So really pay attention to what size your brush is when you're painting. If you want to make it look like there's a candle lighting up the inside of your jack-o'-lantern, you can use the yellow paint on the inside. It's always a good idea to wait for your areas to dry before you move on to another area in your painting. That way your arm won't drag across the wet paint. If you don't have time to do that, that's fine. You can turn your paper so that like the leaves are closest to you. So I'm going to paint my leaves green, and I have 2 pretty greens in my palette. If you want to mix your own green, you can do that with yellow and blue. Don't forget to paint your ground. You can paint it green or you can paint it brown like it's dirt. I'm still using my smaller brush because this was a smaller area. Now for the background, you can decide what color you want to paint your background. If you want it to be daytime, you can paint it bright blue or turquoise, or you could water down your blue. If you wanted it to be more like nighttime, you could paint it with a darker blue. I actually mixed a little bit of blue and black together, more blue and a little bit of black, and I switched to a larger brush. I'm pretty careful about painting around my leaves, but if you wanted to outline the area around your leaves with your smaller brush, you could do that. My pumpkins were dry before I started to paint the background dark blue. If you want to put some stars in the sky, if you wanted to make a night sky, you would do that with yellow crayon before you painted your background. You do not have to do that. Be sure to paint all the area behind your pumpkin all the way down to your ground line. Sometimes kids don't paint all the way down to the ground line. So here is my example with stars in the background. And then here's my example from most recently with a dark blue night sky background. Watercolor paint dries pretty quickly, thank goodness. That's why it's fun and easy for us to use it in art class. So you want to put your painting to the side, and then you want to clean your brushes in your water cups, and then you want to dump your water cups in the sink if you have access to a sink, and then you want to clean off your watercolor palette. Let's say your watercolor palette looks like this. Ugh. How do you clean that? I just put mine in the sink and I rinse the whole thing off. Another thing that you can do is if your paint is still wet in your lid, you can take a damp paper towel or even a dry paper towel and wipe that up. But you want to go ahead and clean that paint off so that next time when we start to paint, when you sit down to paint, your palette is clean and ready to go. All right, boys and girls, I would love to see some of your jack-o'-lantern pictures, so please don't send me 2,000, but if you're super proud of yours and you got great expression on your pumpkins or you mixed beautiful colors, I would love to see some of them. All right, take care, everybody, and I will see you next class.